Hello everyone, it's Minea in front of Learn Languages HD Audio. Welcome to our English learning podcast. So this is a completely new project that is designed to bring English closer to you. Having these shows in audio format is way more comfortable for your busy schedules, and it will make learning English language an interesting process that you can enjoy everywhere you go. So let's get started. Since this is our first episode, we wanted to make it quite conversational. We also thought that it's very important for you to learn the basics before starting this English learning journey. And that's why we wanted to dedicate our first episodes to the general advice and some helpful tips and tricks that will make this process much more fruitful. All of the advice that I'm going to present worked for some of the students. It was very fruitful to them, and that's why we are presenting it to you. But have in mind that different things work for different people. Something that I present here doesn't have to be comfortable or exciting or interesting to you, and you may opt for completely different way of learning. But this is just a general idea, some of the tips for the approach if you don't know where to begin. So my tip number 1 would be don't study it, but study in it. So this is a very general advice, and you can apply it to any language that you're learning. And here is what it means. So here is what this interesting phrase actually means. So when I say don't study it, but study in it, I mean put it into practice. You may have noticed, or you may have not yet, but I intentionally avoid using the word study when it comes to English language or generally languages. Why? Because when we say study, I study 30 minutes, I study 15 minutes every day. That refers to a specific amount of time where we have clear starting and the clear end point. Learning, on the contrary, is a verb that refers to a process. It refers to a gradual improvement. It's something that lasts a period of time. And basically, you can never say, I learned the language. Yeah, I mean, you can, but you can't learn it completely. It's impossible, I believe. Even our native languages, we still may find some vocabulary unknown, strange, and it's very possible that we end up in the situation where we can't understand all of the words, even of our native language. So that's quite impossible thing to say. And that's why I really prefer saying that we learn the languages. Why? Because it shifts our approach. That's the mindset. Whenever we want to acquire a new skill, it's not about materials. It's not about practice. It's not even about the time we invest in it, but it's more about our motivation and our mindset towards that process. So I say, don't study it, but study in it. Basically, you can put your English skills into practice daily, even though you're not living in a country where people speak English every day or where your best friends or colleagues know a single word of English language. How? So you can be listening to some podcasts maybe, or YouTube videos, or you can pick up some light reading like tweets, blogs, non-fiction books, and we may get to it later in the episode, but you can try to do something daily that will put your vocabulary and all of the other skills you have into a certain practice. You can turn your computer on English. Like you can change the language, you can set it to English, or maybe you can Google in English. That's something that's very helpful because it really doesn't take any time and gives you some progress. So you may want to give it a try. My tip number 2 would be chunk it up. So what it means here. I wanted to demonstrate with this first advice a little bit that we actually don't need a lot of time for learning the language, right? Like, we all have 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes. It really sounds insignificant, and it is insignificant because like 10 minutes of 24 hours a day we have, it's really not a big deal, and we will spend it on something else otherwise. But it definitely brings a lot of progress to you when it adds up over time. If you just set 10 minutes a day and 7 days a week, so you have 70 minutes at the end of each week, like it's over an hour of your time dedicated to learning English language a week. And when some time pass, you'll definitely learn a lot only using those 10 minutes. Like, that's a very simple math. So I want to tell you that you can start it now. You don't have to wait until you finish exams. You don't have to wait until your kids go to school or when you have that 1 day a month free. Why? It's very clear, because if you do a certain thing consistently every day, no matter how much time you invest in it, you will be able to get a lot from it. Why? Because it creates a habit. You're making a momentum, and that momentum leads to a habit. And when you get to a habit, when you get to a point when something you do is a habit, it's no longer difficult, it's no longer boring, it's no longer a chore that is hanging above your head, it's no longer something that you have to get yourself to do. Basically, that becomes something that you can't imagine your day without. So learning the language, learning English would be your daily practice, would be something that is as easy and as simple for you as brushing your teeth, like as necessary as that. And as instant as that. You won't have to think about it twice before you do it. So that's why it's very good for you to maybe start with something small, but start now and do it on a longer period of time, over a longer period of time, but consistently. So trying not to make huge gaps. Maybe you can't afford every day, but maybe every second day or maybe 3 times a week would do for you, but just set some goals and try to be consistent with it. Tip number 3 would be don't translate. Well, this may be easier said than done. My practice in English language education show that a lot of students get really pushed back only because they have that habit of translating in their heads. And let's be clear here, let's just pause a minute before we say, oh, it's impossible, I can't do that. Just pause a second and think about it twice. Let's say your native language is Italian or German, and you're trying to learn English. You cannot say completely the same thing in Italian or German and in English. Or in Italian and German, we don't have same words, 100% same words in all of the languages. You cannot convey same meanings. So that's why if you want to learn a language well, and if you want to become fluent, it's very important to give up that habit of translating in your head because of that reason. Translation is a science. It is a completely different field of language education, and translators do very, very difficult job. So trying to illustrate very, very closely meanings that original author had in their minds and in their saying. So that's one of the reasons why you should stop doing it. And the second one would be, well, you're wasting a lot of time. When you're trying to do that, in written language, it's not that catastrophic because you have plenty of time. And when a second person reads what you wrote, they may not notice that. But if you're talking, if you're in a spoken communication, and chances are that you want to learn language because you want to use it in real life situations, well, that's gonna cause you some trouble. You will have some uncomfortable pauses, and that's gonna shrink your confidence, which you definitely don't want to happen. So try to cut it out. And how you can do it? Well, just be minimalistic. Use the words you already know and don't look for anything else. Try doing that. I promise you, if you just try doing that for maybe 5 days, afterward, you will never have need for it. There is another reason why is that important. When you start small, when you start from creating sentences only from words that you know, after some time, you will be able to learn much more rapidly. Because when you do that, you're pushing yourself. You're using and you're kind of building on what you already know, and you will be able to bring back vocabulary that you're acquiring much faster. So that's a very important thing to do. My next tip would be a little bit more concrete. So one of my really close friends once gave me advice, and at that point she was already fluent in 6 languages. And she told me that her number one tool for learning a new language or generally practicing her language skills, no matter how advanced or not advanced she is, was interview. She uses interviews of people who speak the language she targeted as their native language. And that is really amazing. It was a game changer for me for a number of reasons. Firstly, you're building your sentence structures, you're building your slang vocabulary, you're putting grammar into practice, and you're listening to some very interesting collocations. It's very rich. You can enrich your vocabulary and generally your skills. You're sharpening your listening skills and also your speaking skills after some time, because you'll be able to reproduce that. You're maybe strengthening your accent. It gives you a lot of benefits. But on the other hand, you're getting knowledgeable in a variety of subjects. So if you're picking a person from the field that you're interested in, let's say you like sports, and then you take some NBA player and you watch their interviews after games, or maybe you're more into movies, so you're watching the interviews of famous producers or actors that are native English speakers. Well, you're also going to learn a lot about industry. You're going to learn a lot about the subjects that they are talking about and that they are experts in. And that's another reason why I definitely believe you should give it a try. Next, I have some other resources that are going to make learning English a fun process, but also very beneficial. Watch movies. Watch movies, and I really advise and cannot recommend it enough, do it with subtitles in English. That's the key word, in English. So why do I say that? A lot of research showed that when we integrate a couple of senses at the same time, we are going to learn more. That learning session is going to yield much more of a product than it would do if you were using just like one of your senses. So for example, you're reading a book, and I'll get to that later. It's very important. But let's say you're reading a book passively. And on the other hand, you have watching a movie with a subtitle. When you're watching a movie, your listening skills are active. When you're watching a movie with subtitle on, English subtitle, at the same time you're listening and you're also reading, you're seeing that. And instantly you have higher chances of learning more of the vocabulary than you would if you were just passively turning the pages. Then I said books. That's another thing that I can't recommend enough. You're also building your reading skills that are necessary for your day-to-day life, for your work, for your education, no matter what you're into, or for your general literacy. your concentration. It's great for a number of reasons. But when it comes just to language perspective, I believe that reading is something that you can do for fun, that you can do for gaining knowledge, and that you can do for gaining a lot of vocabulary. Aside from vocabulary, there are always sentence structures, grammar structures that are easiest to see in a book, and when something sounds interesting, you can come back to it later, etc. Here we come back to the translation. A lot of people would say, well, I can't read because there would be a lot of words that I don't know. That's true. It will happen, and it will always be happening. Maybe later it would not be that obvious. Maybe that number of unknown words would shrink, but it would still be happening. And of course, it happens in our native languages too sometimes. So what is an advice here? Generally, we say to students, don't translate all of it because you're losing the points, you're losing your thoughts, you can't follow the story that clearly. And when you just translate in the dictionary, maybe that meaning would not match exactly with what you already have in a book. So the key number would be, the magic number would be checking in dictionary maybe 1/3 of the unknown words in a certain book or on a page. Check 1/3 of those, and for the rest, try to conclude from the context. Even though you may not have a clear idea what that word means, you will still be able to understand it, you will still be able to get a point, and you will be able to use that word later, and when you hear it, you will know what it means. So that's a trick, and please stick to it, try it, give it a try, and you'll see I'm right. Then there are a lot of other tools that some of those we have mentioned already, but I believe that I should repeat it all together. So I mentioned YouTube, I mentioned your favorite podcasts, then we also have books. In that category, I also count like magazines, blogs, tweets, light reading, like comments or something. All of that would do a trick. And when you're choosing these materials, choose something that's interesting to you. So if you're generally into science fiction and you don't like romantic movies at all, don't watch romantic movie. Watch a science fiction movie and put on an English subtitle. It's very important that you focus on words that you're going to use. You're learning the language that you will use, not that you will know. And if you don't use it, you will forget it. So when something is interesting to you, it will be easier to follow. And secondly, you will be using those words, so it would stick to you for a longer period of time. You will be able to build on that base much more of the vocabulary. Another tip I have would be to search online for other interesting resources. There are websites such as edX. There are various apps for learning languages. Everyone knows about Duolingo or maybe Drops. These are not the best choices for learning specifically English maybe, but you will find when you just open your Play Store, you'll be able to find a lot of other applications that will make learning a fun process to you. edX is a website that offers free university or courses from other certified institutions, and you can find it in other languages, so you can get use of those materials and build your English skills and your other skills at the same time. This may sound as a lot, but let's summarize it quickly. So the key points, the key takeaways here would be to just start. Start with small goals. Start no matter how much time you have to spare on learning English language at a moment. And over a certain period, you will have a great cumulative effect and you will be amazed at how much you have achieved without even noticing. After some time, it will all become habitual to you. It will become very interesting and necessary, and I promise that you will enjoy it. So, thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for joining me. Once again, it's Minea in front of Learn Languages HD Audio. Stay tuned for other episodes next week. We are bringing you something very interesting, so make sure to follow up. If you have any questions or you want to give us some advice or some ideas for new episodes, make sure to leave comments below. Thank you once again. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hello everyone, it's Minea in front of Learn Languages HD Audio. Welcome to our English learning podcast. So this is a completely new project that is designed to bring English closer to you. Having these shows in audio format is way more comfortable for your busy schedules, and it will make learning English language an interesting process that you can enjoy everywhere you go. Present simple tense. We use it when we talk about our habits, when we talk about certain actions that we perform daily or regularly. Let's say every morning I wake up at 6 a.m. and at 7 a.m. I drive my car to work. So that's your habit. You repeat that same routine every day, but it doesn't have to be every day. It can be like every year we go to a museum. Still, it doesn't have to be that regular, but we want something that repeats over time. We want certain action that doesn't happen just now and it's finished now and we don't talk about it anymore. It's something that happens and repeats itself over time. Another usage of this tense would be for facts. So, something that is general truth, something that is always true and that is a fact. So we can say, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. That's a statement that's always true, it's always correct, and that's why you use present simple tense with it. We can also use it with permanent situations. For example, you can say, I live in Germany. That means that over a longer period of time, you live in Germany. That's your place of living, that's your location, and that's why you want to use this present simple tense that refers to something that is very general, that is very stable, and that happens over a longer period of time. Also, there is another usage of present simple tense that we are going to mention. Although I have already said that we don't use present simple tense when we talk about actions that happen at the moment, when we are talking about them, and that we have started now and that we are going to finish maybe in a couple of minutes. But there is an exception to a rule. So let's imagine you're watching a show, you're watching a match, football match, and then you have that person that is commenting it saying like, he has the ball and he scores a goal. So he sees that in that moment, and of course, grammatically, that's correct. That's a correct usage because it's not necessary to use those progressive tenses that we are going to mention later because that's a short action and it lasts a short period of time. So that's why it's not necessary to use the progressive tense that we are going to mention later. How do we form this present simple tense? So when we want to make a positive sentence, we use subject on a first place. An English language subject often comes at a first place. You have subject, and then you have verb in its basic form, in its infinitive form. Also, it can be, we can also have another form in the present simple, and that's for the third person singular. So when we have he, she, or it, we can say she walks to school or she drives to school every day because we add that s to a third person singular form of a verb. How do we form this present simple tense? So when we want to make a positive sentence, we use subject on a first place. An English language subject often comes at a first place. You have subject, and then you have verb in its basic form, in its infinitive form. We can also have another form in the present simple, and that's for the third person singular. So when we have he, she, or it, we can say she walks to school or she drives to school every day because we add that S to a third person singular form of a verb. When we want to make it negative, we use a helping auxiliary verb do, and we make it negative. So we say, I don't drive to school every day. But you can also say, she doesn't drive to school every day. So we have do and does as the forms of verb to do, but does comes to a third person singular. There is one thing to notice, that we say, he drives to school every day, but we also say, he doesn't drive to school every day. Most of the tenses are going to make their interrogative forms just by inversion. That means that a subject and that auxiliary verb are going to switch the positions. So the subject is no longer on a first position, it's going to come to a second one, and do or does in this case are going to come to the front. So it's going to be, does she go to school every day? Does he drive to school every day? Do you wash your car regularly? There is another thing that can be helpful to you when you're maybe tested in school on tenses. It's the fact that there are certain adverbs of time that are going to serve the purpose of a sign mark, like a sign on a road. When you say those, it's more likely that you're going to use present simple, for example. So we have, for present simple, those adverbs of time are often, always, usually, sometimes, like those adverbs of frequency. And they, if you just think about the meaning of those words, you're going to see that they imply a certain habitual repetition. So that's all for the present simple tense. Hello everyone, welcome to Learn Languages HD Audio podcast. We love to have you with us, and make sure to learn something new today and expand your horizons for a little bit. This is our first episode in 2021, and it is a fresh start for all of us. Therefore, we are going to do something a little bit different from usual. We'll be talking about you and how the alternative life conditions affect you, and how could you make it a bit more pleasant or go through it after all. So today's topic is going to be on the coronavirus crisis, but from a little bit different perspective, from a little bit different point of view. It's about the time for me to properly introduce myself as well. I'm Minea, and I'm a college student from Montenegro. At the moment, I'm studying chemical engineering at the University of Montenegro. However, it is not what brought me here, what made me worth considering for the podcast at all. For years, I've been teaching English in various forms as a volunteer. I love languages, I enjoy learning and sharing what I know. It fulfills me, inspires me, makes me feel better about myself. After taking a variety of English exams, and some of them meant for natives, I gained a different perspective on education in general. I engaged in different seminars, different associations, and for a year I've been a full-time English tutor online, working with people from all over the globe, all ages, all levels of English experience. Aside, I'm a freelance writer working on other people's blogs and aspiring to develop my own. Well, I have been working from home completely online before the coronavirus pandemic and also during it. Also, I have been a student during the pandemic. Thus, I can start this story from my own point of view. Working online brings many benefits. It gives you freedom, flexibility to manage your own hours, and it's also very comfortable. For example, on rainy days or windy days, like wind can get very strong in my city. Actually, today is very windy and cold too, but on days like this, it feels very good to be at home in comfy clothes, in warm and pleasant. Not to mention that this working style cuts commuting time and gives you an opportunity to focus more on yourself, doing something you enjoy, or spending time with family. There are many benefits. However, there are certainly downsides too. For me personally, and for some people I talk to, motivation is a great challenge when we have all this flexibility. It's all on us. It's on you. When are you going to wake up? When you're going to go to bed? When are you going to take a lunch break? Or whether or not you're taking a walk? There is so much on you to decide. And that's why many people have faced a certain amount of decision fatigue. Because everything you do, there are no rules, there are no routines. Everything you should decide on yourself, by yourself. And you are responsible for all of your decisions, which is also very stressful. But after a certain time, people get stressed and burned out just with that decision fatigue. There are limited or no options for real or eye-to-eye communication, human interaction, which by our biology, our species needs. It is hard to measure your achievements, hard to work on your own. Some companies and employers have figured it out well and try to reward their teams and stimulated their HR department and everything, but it's not the case for everyone, and not everyone had that chance. And that's why working on your own and seeing your own achievements can get quite intimidating. We're constantly surrounded by distractions. I have experienced several nervous breaks on the technical issues, such as the internet stops working completely all of a sudden, unexpectedly, or a computer running into a sudden and very long update when I have a full day of lectures scheduled ahead. So those are some of the setbacks that we cannot really control, and that can give us hard time when we're trying to adapt to these working conditions. Studying from home, partially or completely, also gives you an advantage of more time for studying, like less commute, less time spent with friends, and thus you, at least hypothetically, have more time for studying. Time management is more flexible, and this is an opportunity also to give a shout out to professors, teachers, and other education workers who have been trying hard to accomplish their mission in cruel conditions set by coronavirus pandemic, where we had to substitute the very essence of the job, the classroom, the interaction with alternatives. And students worldwide recognize these efforts and highly appreciate it. Many studies have been done on the effectiveness of these methods of living style. It for sure has been a shaping experience, professionally and privately. But one thing I got to hear a lot from students and friends studying in the United States, Japan, Thailand, South Korea, Spain, Slovenia, and other Balkans, Austria, and so on, that we are having a hard time. We are missing on experiences important for our careers. And the list could go on. We could continue listing positive and negative aspects of working and studying from home, on and on. But one thing is for sure, when it keeps on going, it gets harder to enjoy the benefits the situation provides. I've seen a video just the other day where the family compared life in quarantine back in March to today's situation, and it is a meme, it's interesting, it's funny video, but in general, I could really relate to that. Although it was a parody, it was meant to entertain us, but under it all, I could really recognize a lot of truth. The overall point is that we should not be hard on ourselves. It is hard to keep up with everything that's going on. We live in fear and in the conditions that are not so natural. After the lockdowns became so normal, unfortunately, we stopped seeing articles on how to manage these conditions, how to go through the situation, ideas, benefits, advice. On the news, people don't talk about this backbone, about how the overall situation affects our day-to-day life. And I made this episode to point out that although this becomes normal, it shouldn't be taken like it. It should not be assumed that we got used to it, because as we have seen, the more it goes on, the more challenges it brings. So in 2021, keep in touch with your people, listen to each other, help your friend with whatever he deals with. Think about yourself and your own priorities. Think again of your goals, and we as people would go through this whole thing together. As the Giraffe research has supported above presented statements, I'm going to present some advice for if you have Zoom fatigue, if you struggle with taking the exams, keeping up with deadlines at work, for if the initial excitement of working from home has worn off for you, or if you just want to make lockdown more pleasant for yourself. I will use the structures should and ought to. These are the most common modal verbs to use for giving advice in English language. It's important to see a slight difference here. When we say you should go see a doctor, you should travel to another city on Friday and see what they have to offer for this issue. We should see each other more often. We have this structure should that is followed by infinitive. So you should see, you should go. There is another phrase, ought to. We use to infinitive, not bare infinitive as we used it with should, but to infinitive. For example, you ought to go, you ought to see. We should not forget this slight difference here. These are other ways to give someone a word on a problem is to use indirect questions like, why don't you travel? Why don't you go see someone? Why don't we go to the cinema next week, for example? Or you could use another structure, which is, if I were you, I would. So if I were you, I would work more to solve this problem. If I were you, I would see my friends more often. If I was in your place, like if it was my life, this is what I would do. So a good idea to give someone an advice that you really stand behind. And this statement, if I were you, this structure is a conditional statement, which sooner or later you're going to cover in depth. But just as you know it, as an example, something that you should use and you could use to give someone advice. And when you're talking to someone in English, or if you, as many other people worldwide now, started meeting friends online through different chat groups and different applications, using English as a common language is a challenge. So these are just some ideas that would help you around. So the very first advice I have for you is that you should figure out what moves you. You should figure out what feels good for you. What are your passions? What are your goals? Figure out what motivates you, what inspires you, and try to incorporate that into your daily routine. We often forget that going on and living and accomplishing something from time to time requires a bit of introspection, seeing what you feel comfortable with, thinking about yourself and the way you're dealing with things, the way you live, the way you work, the way you communicate, seeing what you can change or what you can be doing more of. And in this time, more than ever before, it's quite necessary to sit down and think, talk to yourself, and see what you can do to feel better. And then why don't you do more of it? Another thing that is proven to be helpful in this situation and that is recommended by psychologists is to set deadlines. if you don't have specific deadlines, like I didn't have when it comes to my work, I didn't have any boundaries, any rules that I should follow. For example, how much I should work, what are the days I should be working, what are my working hours. Everything was on me to choose. So the way to go through it successfully and with less frustration was to set my own deadlines and my own rules for the game. Psychologists say that these times, when it comes to coronavirus, constant changes, checking up the news, counting the infected people, listening about how many people died daily, it all brings a lot of frustration and also a lot of challenges and an urge to adapt and to compromise. We are constantly in need to adapt. And that's where decision fatigue also comes from. So psychologists and other experts recommend that we should try to set our routines. When we set routines and rules that we go by, we're limited the number of decisions that we ought to make daily. So therefore, we will ease the tension in our brain and the place where there is awfully a lot going on in this period. It would help us with all the inner struggles and it would kind of ease our mind. So setting the routines, deadlines, and certain plans would be very beneficial. Of course, it's something that maybe is not so familiar to you, setting a goal, and maybe then we could struggle with how to keep up with that. But once we do that successfully for at least a couple of days, we will see a great transformation and we would feel a spike in our motivation level. So starting with something small, with very simple, attainable goals, and fulfilling those daily would make a good change for you, according to psychologists and many people who have experienced it already. The working from home environment or studying from home environment, as research says, this environment doesn't give many opportunities for rewards. If we were in the office, we could be getting incentives, we could have talks with our boss, with our coordinators, our colleagues. We could measure our success and our work could be recognized. Psychologically, our brain works on rewards. And that's something that kept us going through the hard days back then when we were working in unrestricted conditions. Nowadays, we could find ways to reward ourselves. Whatever it is and whatever the area of work you're doing, whatever you consider an accomplishment, try when you achieve something to give yourself a little reward in any form you prefer. It's also recommended to take breaks, regular breaks. I know that when you're working from home, it's quite hard to distinguish, to make a boundary between private life and working life. It's hard to decide what the break is. It's hard to focus work, and that's why we feel like we don't deserve breaks. But sometimes a little bit of getaway, or just forgetting, easing your mind, giving yourself a complete psychological break from everything that's going on would also help you and stimulate your further work. And another big thing to say is that we should not be comparing ourselves. But all of this advice stands for studying and working from home or just dealing with the situation. We have seen via social media how people used lockdown to create, to build the new routines, new habits, to try something new, to start working out, start something major, write a book, whatever. Some people made the difference. Use this time effectively. However, it can't be that way for everyone. So as students, we should not be comparing our grades and our functioning system with our friends. Not in a bad way. We could consult our friends, we could see how they do, and maybe ask them for advice, trying to change something in our own functioning, but we should not feel inferior to anyone just because we are not keeping the track with everything, or if we are not making as much progress as someone next to us. We should not consider that a barrier or not an internal struggle. The same goes for work. Don't compare to your colleagues. Don't compare to your significant others, your brothers, sisters. In general, don't compare to peers and to people around you, because everyone has their own way of functioning. And as I always love to say, different people do things differently, different people think differently, and different people live differently. That's why you should, back to the first advice, think about yourself, figure out what is good for you, what makes you feel better, what excites you, what motivates you, and try to keep on going with that. So thank you for being with us in the first episode for 2021. It was a little bit different than usual, but I hope that you gained some value from this talk, that you feel better, more inspired, or more motivated to continue your day. Thank you for being with us. Make sure to learn something new today and expand your horizons for just a little bit. Have a great day. See you. Hello everyone, welcome to the Learn Languages HD audio podcast. We love to have you with us. Make sure to learn something new today and expand your horizons for a little bit. December, January, and February are known to the students' population worldwide as the months that are in red for stress zone. That's where most of the countries worldwide and for university students and for high school students perform final examination. That's why we wanted to dedicate this episode to all of you who have or who had already had trouble with the stress and dealing with the stress of the examination season. Also, it was a good chance for us to talk about the balance, between studying and working, or between your personal life and your working life, your business life. So all of us tend to fall in that trap of sometimes giving too much on one end and completely forgetting about the other things and responsibilities that we have, or we just find it so overwhelming to be on all of those places at the same time being. And that's something that we can't do much about. Basically, in our lives, we have to encounter multiple roles. So we are both parents and business people, or we're both students and we are supposed to work, or we all have different responsibilities, and balancing those out in the same time can get quite stressful at times. And that's why we thought that this could be a right moment to introduce that topic, give you some advice on how to help yourself in those situations. It seems like a good start of the year to acquire that new skill of dealing with stress that new responsibilities and new events bring in our lives. First of all, when we focus on student population, many times people ask themselves, why do I need this? Like, why shouldn't I or why couldn't I just sit in my room with a book, complete my studying responsibilities, and that's all? In many countries, however, that's still a problem, that those kinds of extracurricular activities or self-improvement on the other levels that are not strictly connected or tied to school are not appreciated enough at the moment. but a positive example of the systems that incorporated these activities into their curriculums or into the general acceptance, generally socially approved, those kinds of activities and involvement systems that stimulate that kind of response. We could say that the United States is quite good there. Why United States? For example, if you want to apply to the university in the United States, you have to, aside from your grades and school transcripts and everything else you do in school, like how you behave and etc., you have to present what else you did, how else you stand out, and what makes you different. So basically, you could show your hobbies, you could show your other responsibilities, tasks, anything that involves you in community, any community, anything that makes you more well-rounded person and personality. You could also ask at this point, why are the schools interested in that kind of information? Why do I need that? Well, we could simply answer that. So all the things that you do outside of your studies, no matter what degree you are on, so whether you're a college student or high school student or even elementary school student, everything you do outside of your studies contributes to your overall experience. It enriches you as a person and also makes you better for the other tasks. For example, it will make your critical thinking better, or all those activities would sharpen your other skills, which would certainly contribute to your professional development and to your academic achievements. Another thing important to mention is that not even schools expect you to study 24/7. Although your studying is treated like a full-time responsibility, still they calculate your involvement hours per week to around 30 to 35 hours, which basically leaves a lot of space for other things to be incorporated too. So if you commit yourself to well-defined study times, you would have a lot of time left to enjoy a range of different activities of your choice. I already said that activities that you complete outside of your first responsibilities in life, let's define it that way, really make you grow better as a person, not just professionally, but also when it comes to your general virtues and to you as a person. They make you better human being. They also make you feel happier. So for example, if you work 9 to 5 or even longer than that, in many countries it's quite common for people to work way above 9 to 5 daily. Having some hobby, having some sort of occupation to vent out the stress and to clear your mind, having some space to let you breathe would definitely stimulate you, make you more productive, make you more engaged, and generally make you happier. And when you're happier, you're better for everyone around yourself and for any sort of work that you're involved in. For students, one of the motivations, I already mentioned the example of the United States, one of the motivations to participate in your community or generally to engage in a lot of different things could be professional development. For example, if you're aiming to achieve some high scores, if you're aiming for certain scholarships, certain medals, certain championships, competitions, whatever it is, to have some sort of formal recognition of your success, that's one of the very good motivators for the start. But it definitely shouldn't be the only one, because everything you do in your life defines who you are going to be. Every opportunity you take enriches you in numerous ways. And since we already met, I find it appropriate to give some examples from my personal life. When I was elementary school student and also high school student, I was very active. Although it is not so common in my community, we're not stimulated to engage anything other than school formally. So for example, if you submit to the university, if you apply, no one has any chance of looking at you as a person, like what you do, what are your hobbies, what were you involved in. all that matters are your grades. And yeah, it is what it is. We can't change that at the moment. But still, recently, schools, when I say recently, I really mean a couple, maybe like last decade or maybe last 5 years, schools slowly started to encourage these kinds of activities to students, especially to gifted students. Schools started to encourage their students to involve and to participate. Because from that educational point of view, it's very beneficial to the person and to your overall personal, emotional development. Also, social development counts. So over the range of my whole studies, I was involved in different set of activities. So I was always in a choir. I was always a performer. I was always a dancer. I used to write. I used to volunteer. And it wasn't before I joined certain clubs, I didn't realize how much actually I loved volunteering. Like I would never think of it in a younger age. And what I found there is not only that I felt very satisfied while doing it, that I felt happy. It's that I made so many connections. I made so many friends that are not from my high school, that are not from my class, that are not from my neighborhood. I got to meet a lot of different people. I got to meet people from all over the globe. Also, I got to learn a lot of skills. As a volunteer in an NGO, I learned how to run projects. I learned how to create content, visual content. Like it was the first time to be presented with a certain software for producing different visual content. And I loved it. And later on in my career, even though it wasn't so long ago, I had many chances to use those skills and to use that program, and I got to use it better with time. But it wasn't before I was given the responsibility. So my mentors in the organization found it appropriate to give to me as a 16-year-old at the time to completely create by myself all of the materials for a campaign. So that organization deals with public health. So every December, when we celebrate the International Day of Fight Against HIV, they create something special to the community. And that year, they gave me the chance to translate certain messages and to create visuals for their posters, for their billboards, and for their social media. For me, it was a huge thing, a huge responsibility, but it taught me a few things. Not to mention that some of my first experiences teaching English were actually as a volunteer in American Corner in my country. There, I got those first moments when I was standing in front of a class. It was an extracurricular activity for students. So for the low-income families who cannot afford certain paid recreational activities or extra educational activities to their kids, they could bring them to the American Corner, where us volunteers would be teaching them for free. I got to meet some great children. I got to inspire them, and I got to share what I know with them. And it was not only rewarding, but it also taught me a handful of skills, professional as well as social. In my grade 3 of high school, I got an opportunity to apply for a scholarship to the Yale University summer program in the United States, and I got to hear about it from my advisor in the American Corner where I was volunteer at the time. I applied, and one of the things that I still believe that got me there and that earned me that scholarship, aside from my grades, was the fact that I was actually a very active volunteer and that I was a very active participator in their community. So the admissions team believed that if I could come there, if I could meet new people, learn some new things, I could happily share it with my community and spread it as widely as possible, which was actually the truth. Not only that I was able to meet top professors, at that university, or to see some extraordinary facilities and enjoy the spirit of the campus and of the local students. And it wasn't only that I got to learn so much about science, which is basically my major and my first passion, I also got to meet people from everywhere around the world. In that period, my roommate was from Africa, from Senegal, and I'm all the way in Europe, and that's where I made one of the lifetime friendships. It was just one of the benefits that I got from engaging in my community and into different activities. I also got to learn responsibility, taking risks, organizing time, and I also got to learn courage and independence at a very young age. And I believe that it really helped my career and it helped me get where I am at the moment. And I hope that if I keep going that way, it's gonna also help me fly higher. At the moment, I'm a student and I'm also working as a freelancer. And I believe that I'm already making a lot of use of skills that I acquired previously and that I mentioned. And that's why I thought that my personal story would be interesting and stimulating to you to see that everything can be somehow balanced out if we try and if we keep learning, growing, and keep fighting and trying. So in today's lesson, we prepared some of the general advice that could help you deal with stressful situations and help you manage your time better so that you can enjoy all the perks that active involvement in life can bring you. And a small explanation, a small note that I haven't mentioned before, but I find it to be very important. It doesn't have to be involving in activity. It doesn't have to be that you do something somewhere and something incredible. It can be something that you do just for yourself. So if you like reading, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to say, okay, now I'm working, now I'm studying, now I have exams, I don't have time for that. Or if you're really passionate about sports, you can happily incorporate that in your schedule and enjoy growing on both of the sides of your life. Also, it could be social life. Like many students have that trouble if they are very successful educationally. They've found it hard to maintain active social life, which also doesn't have to be the fact. So here are our tips and general advice if you find yourself in that situation or if you know someone who can benefit from this idea. First advice would be to create clear boundaries. That's something that many people complained about when it came to whole COVID situation and lockdowns, that when working from home, they find it really hard to set a boundary between their private time and between their working time. So in this case, we can also understand it the same way, so that you need to make a time, like time slots, time boundary between everything you want to incorporate in your daily routines. But also create clear boundaries, for me, signifies that you should think about what makes you happy, what you enjoy, what is that really is your passion, and what is that you really want to commit for. And it leads to the fact that you should create clear boundaries in time, but you should also create and set specific goals for yourself or specific intentions. They don't have to be something measurable. For example, I would read 20 pages a day, or I would go for a marathon, or my goal is to get a promotion. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be just your own personal intention, but it has to be clear. You have to know what is that you want to really commit to. Second piece of advice would be to take control. Especially in these stressful situations, we feel like we're out of control of our time, of our life, that we're just like puppets on the strings, and definitely someone else is pulling the strings. That's not the truth. That's something that I have to tell you. So you should organize yourself and don't let activities overwhelm you. When I say organize, it doesn't really mean only to organize your time. It means to organize your life, whatever that signifies for you. For me, it was to organize my storage space, to organize my closet, to organize my digital files, to kind of create certain tidiness all around me. And that will help me also be more clear in my mind, and help me organize my time accordingly. Some specific tools that could help you with getting organized are, for example, Microsoft To Do as a very useful and neat software for creating to-do lists and all the other sorts of lists. You can title them any way you want. It has very clear interface and is easy to use and to set as you want. And you can connect it to your PC since it's a Microsoft software. There is a high chance that you already have it installed on your computer or your phone. So why don't you give it a try? Another very famous tool at the moment is Notion. It's like a note-taking app. Generally, it started as a note-taking software. So many students worldwide use it to take their notes and to organize their educational life before a new semester or over the semester. But people also use it to organize all different sets of things. So there you can find templates for project organization, or you can just create it on your own. That's something that really makes this application stand out, that you can frame it any way you want. So basically you can make it a to-do list, you can make it your diary, you can make it your school notebook, whatever you want, and you can also create the interface any way you like. And a good thing is that there are plenty of resources and tutorials online on how to use Notion, and also all different sets of ideas, how you can implement it, like what people use it for. So it can maybe give you some ideas how you could benefit from the software. Other people really don't prefer going all digital with those kind of stuff, and partially I'm like that. I do use Notion and I did use Microsoft To Do, but when I'm really into a stressful situation, I really prefer going completely analog, like taking a notebook or a pen and piece of paper and writing down what's in my head, trying to organize it on the paper. Seems to be much easier than it is to do it in my head. Another advice that is related to student situation is to study with others. Many students claim that when they feel very stressed, they lose motivation somehow. It's maybe not so logical, but after a longer period of time, we do tend to experience certain burnout, certain lack of will and motivation, and that's where studying with others could help you with. Not only that would keep you accountable, but it would help you to get yourself to do it. So if you already scheduled a session with your friends, you're far less likely to actually cancel it and not to study. And there is that psychological trick that when you're doing it with others, you would be comparing yourself to them. So if you see all of them studying, you would feel bad not to do so. And you will start, or you will be just staring at a book, and somehow you will get to go through it. This actually works for the business life as well. If you have a difficult project that you feel really stressed about and that troubles your mind, but you feel very hard to get yourself to do it and to concentrate on it, then if you just share your working space with someone, you don't really have to be working on the same project. It could be your husband or your significant other or your family members, your friends. You could be just sitting in the same space, and while you're together, you will feel more strength and more power to embark on your own tasks. Another advice that I used to hear often is to study in small chunks. For example, to use Pomodoro technique, which actually is a studying technique or working technique in general, where you do 25 minutes of concentrated work, and then you give yourself 5-minute breaks, and then you continue with another 25-minute session. And I think you then complete 4 25-minute sessions, and then you take half an hour break or something like that. I really forgot since I haven't used that method in a while, but many people benefit from it, and there are many timers like just intended for that technique, Pomodoro timers, applications for that. If you have troubles motivating yourself to start, you could definitely make use of it. But another thing that I found in a YouTube video, and it really works for me better than studying in small chunks, is a technique with study blocks. So I was watching it on a YouTube channel of a medical student, and he says that he actually divides his work into 2 4-hour sessions. And why he does it that way? Because if you sit for a longer time in uninterrupted environment, if you do uninterrupted and continuous work, you're far more likely to get into the zone, and you'll probably give out better results. This technique is really all about minimizing distractions and staying there for a longer period of time, which I found to be very useful, especially for university students, since the tasks you gotta do are probably larger than for the other students. And maybe for the business world, Pomodoro technique would work better. It really depends on what you do, actually. But the whole idea behind it is that you don't have to get yourself to do something multiple times a day. Using this technique, you would have to make that effort to start only 2 times. You study 4 hours, and then you give yourself 1 hour, 2-hour break, and then you do another session for 4 hours. So you ultimately use less of the willpower. You have to waste less of the willpower to get yourself to do it. And imagine you were just sitting there and trying to study, and whenever your phone beeps, you would be checking it, and then you have to get into the studying or working mode again. So I really love this one. And if you don't want to do it for 4 hours, it could be 2 or 1 hour and a half or 3 hours. Doesn't really matter, but it's just that you cut on the time and cut on the breaks, and that you actually cut on the willpower that you have to invest into getting yourself to do something. Whatever it is that you're going through at the moment, whatever you're dealing with, I hope that this episode would inspire you to think what else you can do for yourself. What are the other things in your life that you can incorporate? Whether it is a new hobby, new skill, new activity, spending more time with friends, family, spending more time studying, getting a part-time gig, whatever it is, try to think what else you can do for yourself, and think about what you do, and think about how you do it, how you spend your time, and where there is a room for improvement. Because if you improve the way you're spending your time, if you work on that quality, ultimately you will raise the quality of your future and of your well-being. Thank you for being with us. I hope you had a good time, and I really hope to meet you soon again in the next episode. Bye-bye. Hello everyone, welcome to the Learn Languages HD audio podcast. We'd love to have you with us. Make sure to learn something new today and expand your horizons for a little bit. Recently, I have seen an interesting movie, and it's called Blade Runner. To me, there was something very special about it, and that's why I decided to have it as a subtopic of today's episode. Our topic for today would be future world and how actions of the mankind could affect the way our planet and our environment and our living would be in the future. Language-wise, we would also cover conditional sentences, which is a grammar structure that many students, for some reason, find difficult to understand at first, but it's a grammar structure that has numerous applications, both in spoken and written communication in English. So I believe it's very necessary to learn it sooner or later. So at some point during this episode, we will quickly explain this concept, and we would use it to make a couple of sentences. So when I said the Blade Runner, you may have wondered, what is that actually? Because that's the question that I asked myself too when a friend recommended me to watch this movie. Well, Blade Runner is a job, is an occupation, is a career of the future, as the directors and creators of this movie defined it. So the Blade Runner is like a police detective that is running and chasing replicants. And the replicants are the humans of the future. They are genetically modified individuals, which at the point where this action takes place, don't differ a lot from regular people. And it takes long examinations and different sorts of tests to determine whether a person is a replicant or not. And the companies that are producing them are actually doing their best to remove that difference, to make them as similar to humans as possible. And they kind of succeeded in that, because in the first movie we get to meet a replicant that was very hard to spot. It was very hard to determine that she actually is not the real human being. So there are two Blade Runner movies, one created in 1982, and there the main actor is a Blade Runner, and he's brought to the planet to run and find 4 replicants that are actually criminals, that have committed various crimes, and that authorities considered a threat to the world. At that point, replicants had one and only role in the society, and that was the role of slaves. They lived on a different planet from Earth, and they were used as a socially approved slaves to the people of those days. While the Blade Runner is hunting them, he actually meets experiences that would change his lifetime forever and his future forever. In the second movie, which was filmed in 2017 and is called Blade Runner 2049, a new young Blade Runner, K, discovers a long buried and well protected secret that actually leads him to the former Blade Runner from the first episode, Rick Deckard, who has gone missing for 30 years. So the second movie actually is the story that happens 30 years later from the first part. What was striking to me when it comes to this movie is that when I saw it first time, I sort of thought, wow, this may be a sci-fi in the moment. Like when the first one was created, it's 1982. Maybe that's how they perceive the future, and I actually recognize some of the elements of their environment. I could see that in our days, and maybe something that was sci-fi then and that is sci-fi now would actually come alive and real in the future. What was striking is that it's always dark. They're riding through the air. They have flying cars. Everything works and looks different, but it still has very striking similarities to the world we're living in. And this movie brought me to thinking about how climate change and how our actions as people actually are changing the environment and changing the future that we live in. For a young individual, many studies that I have read talking about the predictions for our future are very frightening. and the fact that changes in our weather patterns are already so visible, and maybe on the European continent not as much as those are on the Asian continent or some other countries worldwide, really got me to the point that maybe we are not talking about it enough. So we have issues with COVID, we have issues with politics worldwide, and there are many other things that are certainly categorized as priorities of the mankind at the moment, and let's say problems of the highest priority to be solved. But if we tend to be forgetting these very crucial moments, this very ongoing and dramatic problem that's been going on for years, and do nothing about it on a daily basis, where that's going to lead us. So that's the power, and those are the questions that this movie opened to me, and I thought that it might be useful to talk about the climate change and to talk about how science and all the achievements that we have today can actually help with the situation we live in. I believe, as a young individual, that young people are those that actually hold a lot of responsibility at the moment, although we believe that as teenagers or young grown-ups, we don't really have much of the power to change anything. Or maybe even as parents, we don't believe that we can influence the ongoing situations that got to be worrisome. And I believe that in developed countries, these topics are even more prioritized than in the countries that are developing. So here goes the list of the activities one can take every day to help fight this global crisis, and maybe we could send the broader message that whatever crisis and whatever happens, whether it is climate change or problems with COVID or whatever problems we may have in our personal lives, realize that it has something to do with us and our daily lives. Nothing can actually be solved. So there is the term that is called carbon footprint. And when I first got to know about it, it taught me that carbon footprint nationwide is calculated from the data of individuals. So we can calculate carbon footprint personally or on the basis of our family or on our community, like school community, or on our city. It can be calculated on various different levels, but it's nothing else than a sum of all of our actions and interactions, if you can get what I'm saying. And that's why the first advice actually tells, and one of the components, one of the aspects that is used in the calculation of one's carbon footprint is their energy consumption. So the first advice I have here is that we should use energy wisely. And by doing that, we're not only saving planet, but we're also saving money too. And there is a fact that Canada is the top per capita, so per capita means per person, per a citizen, energy consumer in the world. And it's believed that if we become more energy efficient, we would not only be polluting less around, but we would also be saving a lot on our budget. And believe it or not, it can be done by making some very, very tiny changes. And when you incorporate that and really stay persistent with it, it can add up and create very big difference. So one of the things you can do is to actually install a programmable thermostat at your home. You could also swap your gas stove for an electric stove, and it will also lower the indoor air pollution. You can unplug computers, TVs, chargers, and all the other electronic devices when you're not specifically using them. You can wash clothes in cold water instead of hot water, and you can hang dry your clothes when you can, and when you cannot, you can use different dryer products that are not electric. A little bit extra on clothes washing would be that leaving out the chemicals like detergents and different soaps, different smelly soaps would actually not only be beneficial to the planet and to the ecosystem, but would be also beneficial to one's health, because the chemicals that are contained in those products go into your breathing system, into your lungs, and could severely damage your health. When you're buying new household appliances, you can take a look into their energy labels and try to find some that are labeled Energy Star or eco-friendly. You could also work on the windows and on doors at your apartment or your house to prevent heat actually from going out of your place, and try to keep it as warm as possible in the winter by spending less on the heating system. And if you really take care of the quality of your windows and doors in your household, you would be also spending less in the summertime for cooling system. Take a look at energy efficient light bulbs and get a home or a workplace energy audit to identify where you can make the most energy saving gains. Another option, if applicable, if possible, is to try to go renewable with your energy sources. I've seen that recently, that in my country, many households have started implementing the solar panels on top of their roofs, and the fact that energy is accumulating, it is quite of an investment at the beginning, but over a longer period of time, it will definitely give you a lot of benefits money-wise. If you don't really have a lot of information on the renewable energy sources and the way you can implement it and use it, there are many resources online where you can also be reading some stories from the people who had experienced it, and there find inspiration for yourself. Believe it or not, our eating habits also affect planet largely, and those decisions that we make daily do not affect our health only in a hormonal way, like whether you're eating a lot of carbohydrates at that moment or you're eating something with a lot of protein, but they also affect your they also affect your health on a larger scale, let's say. So what you can do to make your diet more climate stable and more eco-friendly is to eat more meat-free meals. So to try to go, I don't say that you should go vegan or vegetarian, but you should try to incorporate as much of plant-based diet as possible and as much as you like. And it will also help your internal health a lot. You could try buying organic products and local products whenever possible. I believe that COVID situation really taught us that we should rely as much as possible on the local food producers and generally on the local producers of everything that's available, and using our native resources instead of importing lower class products from the other countries. We shouldn't be wasting food. And that's a huge problem worldwide, that there are many campaigns that are trying to solve it for many years, that while in some countries people are dying out of hunger, in some countries there is so much of the food waste produced. And there are even greater concerns when it comes to that waste. It's not that only we waste our money and our resources, but it's very important to take care of how we store that kind of waste, because if we do that effectively, it doesn't have to be that hazardous. And another great advice is to grow our own food. In my country, there are a lot of agricultural resources and households. I did experience and saw what it is to create and to plant your own food. And it's not only that it's healthy in all possible ways, but it's also really rewarding and satisfying. And last but not least is that we should be having climate conversations. And young people especially should feel like those topics are natural and normal, and that those topics are supposed to be brought up in our day-to-day conversation with people, with friends, with peers, in school, wherever possible. And that shouldn't be worrisome conversation. It should be something that inspires and moves us, because we will be sharing same ideas and trying to. You don't even have to be engaging. We would be sharing same ideas, same goals, and same perspectives, and therefore we could be contributing on the variety of levels. Another great idea that could be implemented, that you can create a club, for example, and one example is green commute, so that you can have a bicycle club or a walking club, and that you can try to reduce your own personal carbon footprint by walking to school, walking to work, or maybe just riding your bike, and you can make yourself healthier mentally, physically, and also you will be doing something for a greater good. Since we mentioned conversations, and since I told you that this topic is quite viral worldwide, and it should be even more, and I hope and believe that it's gonna get more present in the future, I'm here to present conditionals as well. Especially if you're a student, there is a high possibility that at one point or another you will be writing certain essays or comments on this topic. I got it on my TOEFL examination, and when I was practicing for ACTs, I also encountered many times to write something about ecology or sustainability, eco-friendliness, or something like that. So conditional sentences are hypothetical sentences, and there are 4 different types of it. But we don't say first, second, third, and fourth, but we say 0, first, second, and third conditional. Each of those is formed differently and is used in a different situation. And 0 conditional is something that you use when you want to state a fact, scientific fact that is generally true, something like as present simple. You use it for general truth and events that are always like that. And it's formed with present simple and present simple. So you have first sentence and second sentence. And in both of those, we say it if clause and regular clause, and in both clauses you use present simple tense. For example, if you stand in the rain, you get wet. If you heat ice, it melts. Always true, generally true. It reminds you of present simple, and that's why you use present simple in both if clause and subordinate clause. When it comes to first conditional, it's used for possible situations in the future, when you're predicting a likely result in the future, and that's why I thought it's appropriate to use it when we are talking about future world and climate change. For example, this one we form with present simple, but in present simple in the if clause. But in the subordinate clause, you don't use present simple, rather you use will plus verb, so you use future simple tense. For example, if it rains, we will cancel the trip. If you study, you will pass the exam. So the likely result of the actions. Second conditional would be used for hypothetical or unlikely situations. People usually mix up these two because first conditional is used for possible situations in the future, predictable outcomes, while second conditional is completely hypothetical and unreal or improbable situations in the future. It still could happen, but the possibility is quite low. And we form it with past simple in if clause and would plus verb in the subordinate clause. So if I won the lottery, I would travel a lot. Or if they sold their house, they would be rich. If they created engineered humans, they would look completely different from us. Something like that. So if you want to engage in conversations that are predictive, that are hypothetical, I believe that you can be using conditionals quite a lot, and that you will tie the condition, certain condition, and the result, which can be always true, probable, or improbable, depending on your point. So hope you learned something today, hope you got inspired once again, and I really hope that we could see you in another episode. There are more interesting topics yet to come, and hope you will stay with us. Have a good day, and thank you. Bye-bye.